Welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:06 p.m. in Central Europe. Summer is now already a long distant memory, pitch black outside. Even the cold winds are beginning to howl in the streets. And so the dreary, depressing, dismal, long evenings of winter are almost here. That with that cheery note, I bid welcome to everybody who has joined me. Welcome to the Gaggle, and there's been a lot going on in the last couple of days. So today we had the prisoner swap, which was kind of surprising. Um, the big part of it was, of course, the Wall Street Journal reporter, the Evan Gershkovich, um, and of course we had Paul Whelan and and uh, and uh, and then various other people like Kara Murza, much beloved by American neocons, and the the big prize for the Russians was of course Krasikov, the convicted murderer in Berlin, who had killed this Chechen terrorist. Um, it was a very strange kind of hit. I mean, we talked about it before on the Gaggle. He was a man in his late 50s, not exactly the type of person that you would want as a professional assassin, since you want to. Somebody says set up on YouTube, please. It is on YouTube. It says we're getting YouTube audiences. Um, but the rest of the people who were exchanged, we had the various figures within the Navalny circle. They've been released to Germany. Then there was this guy who had been convicted of terrorism in Belarus, but he was pardoned by Lukashenko. He's going back to Germany, and that was the and then in terms of whom, see if we can find see if I can find the story of what Russians have been swapped. There, let's see if I can do this. I very rarely am able to do this. For some reason, Rumble is just YouTube is so much better. Rumble is just unable really. Um, let's see. Now, can people see it? Yeah, can people see this? The story in about which Russians have been have been exchanged. So let me go through the names of the Russians, because they haven't been featured very prominently in the news stories. CBS News, need help? No, I don't need any help. And well, certainly not from you. So it says here, we've got Evan Gershkovich, Paul Whelan, and then we got this Russian American journalist Alsu Kurmasheva. The Whelan thing is a little odd because, as you know, I mean, he's been in prison now for 5 years. Obviously, he was involved in espionage. I mean, the guy had 4 passports. I didn't even know you could have 4 different citizenships. I mean, once countries accept dual nationality, I don't quite see why they can't accept quadruple nationality. Anyway, but then obviously you had the various figures in the Navalny circle, and then you have this Krasikov, which again I find it difficult to believe that he was working on behalf of the Russian government, because that's, I mean, he was trying to escape um, by bicycle, and of course he failed to escape. But I mean, it seems ridiculous. I mean, you conduct an assassination, then you try to escape using a bicycle. The odds are not in your favor. Um, and then here, um, that so I mean, the CBS is obviously think that it was this German who was being held in Belarus. That was the sweetener. The Germans didn't want to release Krasikov, but it was this that to sweeten the pot. Lukashenko was prepared to release this German who had been convicted of terrorism in Belarus, and then but the rest seem to be fairly inconsequential. So they said there's the husband and wife team in Slovenia. It says Artem Viktorovich Dulcev and Anna Valerievna Dulceva pleaded guilty to spying charges in Ljubljana. The pair was sentenced to 19 months in prison. I mean, there's nothing. But release on time served and ordered to leave the country and not return within 5 years, which I don't know whether they were planning on spending next summer in Slovenia. So if so, then those plans are dashed. And then it says the two had posed as Argentine citizens to settle in Slovenia in 2017, using false identities under which Artem established an IT company and Anna ran an online art gallery. They were arrested in 2022. Local media said the couple had used Slovenia as their base from which they visited neighboring NATO and European EU nations to deliver orders and cash to fellow operatives from their superiors in Moscow. I don't quite get, orders for what, and what kind of cash did they have in hand. So anyway, and if this is such a big operation that we're going to all these different NATO and EU countries, why were they given these very, very lenient sentences, 19 months? If you're engaged in this massive espionage operation, you don't get 19 months in prison. Then you have a university lecturer in Norway. Norway's security services charged a man working as a university lecturer with espionage activities. I think we covered this before on the Gaggle. In late 2022, saying they had uncovered the true identity of Mikhail Valerievich Mikushin. Mikushin, in his mid-40s, had allegedly been posing as a Brazilian academic, but officials said he was really a Russian spy. So he was posing as a Brazilian academic, but he was really a Russian spy. Anyway, it says CB News Partner Network, BBC News, reported in October 2022 that Norwegian media had cited security services spokesperson Thomas Blom as saying Mikushin, who had used the fake name Jose Assis Giamaria to get a job lecturing in a Norwegian university. Oh, that's great. I mean, that's good. You just make up a completely false identity, attribute all kinds of learned papers that you've written, which you hadn't written, and then you get a job in a Norwegian university, and it's good. was charged with gathering intelligence linked to state secrets. So while he was working as a university lecturer, he was gathering intelligence linked to state secret. Then he says the BBC cited Christo Grozev of the investigative journalism group Bellingcat as saying Mikushin was believed to have links with GRU military intelligence agencies. So your source here is Bellingcat. Incidentally, Bellingcat was also the source for the story about Krasikov. I mean, it was Bellingcat that claimed that as to who Krasikov's real identity was. That said that I don't know whether not in this story. Maybe I saw it in another story about what Krasikov's identity was. And they said it was Bellingcat that told the Germans Krasikov's identity. So again, it's very interesting. Bellingcat keeps popping up, and apparently these hapless intelligence agencies are unable to do any intelligence work of their own, and they have to rely on Bellingcat to tell them the real identity of these people. And then we have a Spanish Russian journalist in Poland, Pavel Alexeyevich Rubtsov, who also goes by his Spanish name, Pablo Gonzalez, had worked for years as a freelance journalist, including for American and European media. When he caught the attention of authorities as he traveled in eastern Ukraine with a photographer. He was told to report to authorities in Kiev in February 2022, not long before Russia launched its full-scale invasion. In February this year, the International Federation of Journalists said he was the only journalist jailed in the European Union, and along with the Reporters Without Borders organization, called for his release and accused Polish authorities of failing to present any evidence against him. So it's very strange. I mean, as we're going through this list of Russians that are being, or Russian agents that are being released, the case against all of them seems a joke. I mean, here, this guy, the Spanish-Russian journalist in Poland, the case is so egregious that even the International Federation of Journalists and the Reporters Without Borders had complained to the Polish authorities. They're saying, you don't have any evidence against him. And then it says, the month after his arrest, Voice of America asked Poland's Internal Security Agency about Rubtsov's detention and was told in a statement that he had been identified as a GRU agent. And then he goes, he carried out activities for Russia using his journalistic status. What activities? As a result, he was able to move freely around Europe and the world, including zones affected by armed conflicts and areas of political tension. But what was he doing? What criminal activities was he engaged in? See, they don't really say. The agency was quoted as saying by Voice of America, adding that he had gathered information that, if used by Russia, could have a direct negative impact on the internal and external security and defense of our country. Well, I don't know. I mean, almost anything anyone says about Poland, in Poland, about Poland, could have a direct and negative impact on the internal and external security and defense of our country. Clearly, they had nothing on him. And that has to go with this, with those two, that couple in Slovenia, which is why, they were given this ridiculous sentence, 19 months, and not only that, 19 months in prison, but released on time served. So in other words, they were kept in captivity for 19 months. Obviously, the court realized that this was a bogus charge. So they said, okay, we'll sentence you to 19 months, and then we can release you right away because this whole thing is a total embarrassment and a joke. And and we'll call it time served. Um, and then the same thing goes with this lecturer in Norway, exposed by Bellingcat. And then we go to these two cyber criminals in the United States. Then we have Roman Seleznev, is the son of a Russian parliamentarian who was sentenced by a US court in December 2017 to 27 years in prison on cyber fraud charges. So that's quite a sentence, 27 years. And it says a federal jury convicted Seleznev the previous year of hacking US business network to steal credit card information, in addition to ringleading an international cyber theft scheme. He was convicted on 38 charges, including computer hacking and wire fraud. Authorities said he targeted restaurants and other businesses in Washington state, stealing credit card numbers to sell on internet forums. Prosecutor said his actions resulted in almost $170 million in credit card losses globally, making him one of the most prolific credit card traffickers in history. All right. Well, that I don't know. I mean, that's it doesn't sound very nice. And then he says Kremlin-linked Russian millionaire Vladislav Klyushin was convicted last year of participating in a $90 million insider trading scheme using secret earnings information about companies, including Microsoft, stolen from computer networks in the US. And then, according to the Associated Press, Klyushin ran a Moscow-based information technology company with ties to the Russian government. And then we have an alleged military equipment smuggler in the US. US prosecutors announced charges in 2022 against 7 individuals, including Russian national Vadim Konoschenok, accusing them of a coordinated effort to evade US export laws to smuggle American-made military-grade equipment into Russia. According to the indictment, so we're only at the indictment stage, from 2017 until the spring of 2022, Konoschenok, and then it goes through them, use shell companies' fake addresses and counterfeit shipping labels to transport the equipment to Russia. So I can see why, in his case, I mean, the Russians would regard him as a Russian patriot and want him back. The other one with the stealing credit card information, that doesn't sound very nice, if true. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting exchange. What I find kind of obviously intriguing is that the case of in the case of the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan, their innocence is assumed automatically. Well, of course, Gershkovich was just a reporter doing his job. So he goes into a military industrial town, which it's a town revolves around military production. And he starts asking questions. You know, what time are your production shifts? How much do you produce daily? You know, when does the shift end? What, you know, do you have some monthly production figures that you can provide for me? This is in the middle of a war. Now, we know that obviously if this happened in the United States, if there were a war, and then some Russian reporter was wandering around in some town, where there's a kind of nuclear complex, or a town, with again, serious military production facility. And this reporter started asking questions. Hey, what time does your early morning shift start? How much, how much, you work do you get done during a day? How many missiles do you expect to produce this week? I don't think the United States authorities would look upon this kindly. Now, we may say, okay, he was just a reporter doing reporter. Maybe he was a bit naive or whatever. Maybe. He may also have been approached by intelligence officials. We don't know. We don't know whether intelligence officials had not approached him and asked him, hey, find out for us something about the production statistics for this facility. And how do we know that his editors at the Wall Street Journal were not approached by intelligence officials and said, why don't you send your reporter, to find out some stuff? This could be really useful for us if we knew something about how much the Russians were actually producing. What their vaunted military-industrial complex. We'd like to know, some details about that. I'm not saying this is what happened, but in the middle of a war, you can see why Russia or anyone else would get quite anxious about a reporter, particularly a reporter, Gershkovich, whose background was in Russia, who's a fluent Russian speaker, and therefore can easily blend in and ask all sorts of questions. But it's just hilarious. Oh no, he's just a reporter. Russians were persecuting a reporter. While the Whelan case is again very, very odd. No one seemed to think it odd. Oh yeah, it's just a businessman. Why does he have 4 passports? And no one should ask any questions. But in the same way, we see how you get Russians that get arrested all the time, imprisoned all the time, and it's just assumed, yeah, of course, spying. That's what Russians do. They're of course spying. So I at this stage, it's hard to know who's got the best of the deal. Obviously, the Biden administration, is congratulating itself. We did a fantastic job. We got this guy. We got Gershkovich out. We got Whelan out. It's fantastic. But the Russians have got people out who they obviously prize. I think Krasikov they regard as a hero because he killed this Chechen terrorist. He didn't do it for any personal gain. He did it as his duty to his fatherland, and so they obviously want him back. I always kind of like the fact that the Russians have a certain attachment to those who have spied for them. They started this whole spy exchanges. It's relatively new. It only started, I think, about 1962 with the first spy exchange, which was, of course, Gary Powers, who was the U-2 pilot who had been shot down by Khrushchev in 1960, because it was a U-2 plane, and he was spying on Russia's nuclear facilities, and was able to relay to his American masters that there was no missile gap, that Russia really didn't have too much by way of missiles. And obviously Khrushchev was very pissed off about that. So Powers was swapped for Rudolf Abel, and that was 1962. And then there were a number of them during the Cold War. The one of the famous ones was, of course, the Kroger spy ring. This was the Portland naval spy case, and they were arrested, imprisoned, and the Soviets had arrested this British teacher, Gerald Brooke, who was bringing in a kind of anti-Soviet literature into the country, but they arrested him, and he was always with a view to doing the swap. So he was arrested, I think, 1965, but the swap didn't take place until 69. But what was interesting about that is that those spies, the Portland spy ring, and he was headed by this guy Konon Molody. So the British referred to him as Gordon Lonsdale, but Gordon Lonsdale was just this name that he had taken. That wasn't his real name. It was Konon Molody. And but you see, these spies, they had been what's known as illegals. So illegals are the ones who take very serious risks, because if you're an illegal, then you don't have any official standing. So if you get caught, the government is just going to throw the book at you. I mean, whereas if you're affiliated with the consulate or affiliated with the embassy or with the trade mission, you enjoy diplomatic immunity. So if you get caught, then they can't really do anything to you because you have diplomatic immunity. So the worst that happens is you're declared a persona non grata and you have 72 hours to leave the country. But the illegals, they took serious risks, and so the Soviets had a real attachment to the people who took such serious risks for the Soviet Union. And it was interesting because Putin, maybe about a year or so ago, gave a speech. I think it was at the Foreign Intelligence Agency, and he talked about these great heroes who were the illegals, who had taken great risks on the part of the Soviet Union, and he mentioned Konon Molody. And it was just better because, again, for the British, they just know him as Gordon Lonsdale, but he referred to him as Konon Molody. And then he mentioned other famous NKVD spies, Ignacy Rice, and so on. So the fact that the Russians wanted these people back, the people who do this stuff and take huge risks on behalf of their country, I think I always thought was kind of rather admirable. So that I think. I mean, the interesting question is, does this portend anything else with the Biden administration? Biden seems to be wanting to wrap a lot of things up. So we had this 9/11 case has led to, this has been going on and on and on now for almost 20 years, but it looks like it's coming to a conclusion with a guilty plea. So that looks like that could be wrapped up quite shortly. It's taken a long negotiations because, of course, the issue was the death penalty, and so they're going to plead guilty but not get the death penalty. So that looks like it's going to be wrapped up. Then we had the Julian Assange case, so that was wrapped up a few weeks ago, and so then the question is, what else is Biden going to wrap up? Is Biden going to wrap up the war in Ukraine? I doubt it. I mean, I really do doubt it, but it's not entirely impossible. that Biden, on the way out the door, so he's worse than a lame duck. I mean, he's just nothing. He's just in the way. Um, he could just simply bring the war to an end. Now, he would of course be attacked domestically, but he can say, I can take the hit because I'm just a lame duck president. So it's you have Trump. If Trump were to try to bring this war to an end, and in a way that would involve Russian occupation of Ukrainian territory, in the way of making some concessions about Ukraine not joining NATO, of course, Trump would come under a lot of attack. His supporters in the Republican Party would abandon him, and he would certainly be in danger of impeachment. The Democrats would then turn on him, and they'd have enough Republicans to support him. So he would face serious political peril if he tried to bring the war to an end on terms deemed favorable for Russia. Harris would also have a problem because Harris would be facing re-election. I mean, Harris would know, I got to, I need to be re-elected in 2028. So I can't be seen to be making concessions to Russia and selling out Ukraine, betraying Ukraine. Who lost Ukraine? So neither Harris nor Trump is in a good position to make any serious concessions. Biden, however, is. Biden, nothing can hurt Biden. I mean, he's got basically, he's just marking time. So now I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying that there's a possibility that Biden just wants to close everything up on his way out the door. So just like he's got this prisoner exchange, he's got the Julian Assange thing off his plate. He's paid off all of his pals who were involved in the Russiagate hoax. Peter Strzok and Page, they got a couple of million bucks between them. So and now we got this 9/11 plea deal. You kind of wonder: does he really just want to tie everything up with a neat bow on his way out the door, and therefore maybe Ukraine is a part of that? I doubt it, to be honest. I don't think he's that imaginative, but it's not impossible. I mean, these big prisoner exchanges. This is one of the biggest. I think there were one or two quite big ones during the Cold War, but they never. There weren't many cases in which they resulted in any great improvement of relations. They were just simply a kind of humanitarian gestures, and so it's by no means clear that this is a portent of any improvement in American-Russian relations. I mean, again, not impossible, but it doesn't mean anything. It's just it's kind of a humanitarian thing. I mean, he did that with Brittany Griner. Why? What was Brittany Griner? He just it's kind of a humanitarian gesture. But we'll see. I mean, it's not impossible that that this could lead to something more significant, but it could also fizzle out inconsequentially. So one other thing I wanted to talk about just before we get on to the Gagglers' comments and observations is the rioting that seems to be now taking place on a fairly regular basis in the United Kingdom. So let's remember, Keir Starmer has been prime minister really for less than a month, July the 4th. It's going to be a month in a couple of days. he seems to be a deeply unpopular prime minister. He gets this landslide. There's none of the good feelings that attended Tony Blair's Cool Britannia landslide of 1997. He's become a hated figure. And this latest rioting, which following this horrific murder of these 3 young girls by the 17-year-old Rwandan. The paper referred to him as, he was born in Cardiff, in Wales. Cardiff, Wales. A Welshman eating leek soup, like as Welshmen are wont to do. I don't know if my friend Dale Owens is here. It's like, he's your countryman. But he's basically, his family came from Rwanda, but I think he was born in Cardiff. But initially, I think there was a belief that this had been a Muslim refugee, and that led to rioting. But there've been protests now in other parts of the UK. The problem for Starmer, and I think is a problem for in France and elsewhere, is that this huge shift in population, this massive migrant increase of the last few decades. I mean, in Britain, there'd been a critical mass building up. After all, Enoch Powell made his famous "Rivers of Blood" speech in April of 1968. So that's 36 years ago. So Powell already, even then, it was already a major problem, or at least Powell, said, we're kind of mad to be allowing this to happen. But then the problem had been legal migration from the Commonwealth, from Commonwealth countries. Now, the justification used at the time, we have some sort of an obligation to the Commonwealth and so on. But of course, it was always a fraud. There was no legal obligation. I mean, once these countries had become independent, there was no obligation for Britain to take in people from the former colonies. But then, under Blair in particular, they started encouraging immigration into the United Kingdom. So when you look at this guy, his family came from Rwanda. Now, Rwanda had never been a British colony. It had been German, then it was Belgium. So why exactly there was this Rwandan couple end up living in the UK? And then, of course, they start a family and so on, and you got this person who went on an insane stabbing spree. You see, that the problem with immigration is always this: the public at large, the public who's actually living in a country, never has any say in the matter. So you're bringing in people. It's a decision made at the highest level to encourage people to come, or at least not to discourage people from coming. The native population is not consulted, but it has to live with the consequences. Now, the consequences obviously is an overburdened healthcare system. I mean, the national health system is just totally overburdened by this vast population. I mean, Britain's population has just grown exponentially, really, in the past few decades. No one knows exactly what the size of Britain's population actually is. I mean, it's supposedly it's around 70 million, but it could well be much more than that. Might be maybe around 80 million. But it's a huge increase in population. Obviously, it's putting a huge burden on the National Health Service, a burden on transport, a burden obviously on the education system. Again, no one has any say in the matter. But the very minimum you would have to ensure is that the country somehow has a net benefit. Is this a net benefit in bringing these people in? Now, if you bring in someone from Rwanda, again, there's no legal obligation whatsoever for someone from Rwanda. And then he goes on a stabbing spree. Then how, what way the people have benefited? And this is really quite a problem, because you now have these riots, and the police are really cracking down on these riots in a very brutal way. I mean, using dogs. You can see they're using fists, truncheons. The politicians, of course, the political class, condemnation of these violent thugs. We will not tolerate this kind of thuggery. And but what's interesting is that they only use this kind of language, they only use this kind of brutal policing when the opposition, the rioters, demonstrators, protesters, are kind of, traditional native white Britons. Just the other day, when there was a riot in Leeds, I think Hare Hills district of Leeds, and it was triggered by some council decision to take the children out from a Romani family, Romani gypsy family, because they thought these children were being abused. So they took the children from this family. Now, that may well be a wrong decision. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a child counselor. I don't know how they make these decisions. But this led to a massive riot. Again, rioting and attacks on the police and so on. This was with the Romani community. And right away, notice how the way the politicians talked about it, the way the media talked about it. It was community this, community that. Well, this is, we have to keep together this community. We have to, maintain the community spirit. Everyone's supporting everyone here in the community. It was just every other word was community. We have this community. The word community never appears whenever you're talking about kind of white indigenous Britons. They're just brutes. They're just thugs. If they get hit over the head with a truncheon, that's what they deserve. But there's no community. They're apparently not a community. So they said, so they were a community, and we got to keep this community. It was just a few outside agitators. It's amazing how they can always determine that there are just these few outside agitators, not the community. The community was, even you watch the footage, looked like pretty much the community was involved in the riots. I mean, I didn't see the outside agitators. Now, the point is this, and I don't know the answer to this. Can this go on? Can you go on cracking down on kind of mainstream public? The people who traditional Britain, the people who go on, with their love of their country, who still for some reason sing Rule Britannia. They were singing Rule Britannia during their protest outside Downing Street yesterday. Or when you had this guy, Lawrence Fox, the actor Lawrence Fox, who's now aligned with Tommy Robinson, and they were at this. They organized this protest at Trafalgar Square on Saturday, and then Lawrence Fox, he gave a kind of very short speech, and then he ended the speech with the statement, "God save the King," and then he expected the crowd to say, "God save the King." So here they are. These are people who proudly boast of their patriotism, their love of their country, the Rule Britannia, and so on. that God save the King, for a country that doesn't give a rat's ass about them. I mean, they made it clear we absolutely, absolutely don't give a shit about you. And I think I've spoken before, particularly at the time of the coronation of Charles, and how the royal family was wrapping itself in this glorious tradition. Oh, this is this is Edward the Confessor. This is this chair. The 700 years old, and the ceremony dates back to the 11th century, and you got the Norman conquest, and so all this wonderful tradition, and you think, God, man, this country really has it oozes history and tradition, and Charles and the monarch and everything just embodies all of that. So they have that for themselves. They keep all that for themselves. Yeah, they like to sit in chairs that are 700 years old and bask in the glory of this long line of kings and queens, culminating in Charles III. The throne, the orb and spectre, the great music of Elgar and Walton, and they wrap it all up, all this stuff, but it's only for them. You people who are living in Southport, in Hartlepool, you who go around protesting, you don't get any of that. We're going to turn this country into what is convenient for us, with our country for cheap labor. We're going to ram this down your throat. And if you don't like it, we're going to set our dogs on you. Literally, we're going to set our dogs on you. They did that during COVID. They did that even yesterday in the protests outside Downing Street. So the thing is that this right-wing populism, I think, is kind of misconceived, because as long as they're wrapping themselves up in the sort of patriotism, into the love of country, we love Great Britain, rule Britannia, God save the King, and celebrating people, the leaders, the rulers of the country, who don't give a shit about them and who just simply dump crap on them. Migrants, crime, economic inequality, poverty, stupid wars. Shove it down your throat. And your only response is to say, God save the Queen. Do you think Charles gives a shit about you? I mean, Charles, he obviously doesn't. He obviously much rather hang out with his good friends at Davos. That's his constituency, his green energy and all the rest. That's his constituency. He doesn't care about his subjects. He thinks they're dirty, grubby, smelly. They talk in their kind of low class accent. They're thugs. They're brutes. So I think it's misconceived, and I think that's why, as long as it's misconceived, Keir Starmer, it doesn't have to be just Keir Starmer. Kash Patel, not Kash Patel, sorry. What's his name? The Indian, but it's the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who he made such a stunning impression as Prime Minister that his name was not Kash Patel. His name was Rishi Sunak. He made such an impression as Prime Minister that his name escaped me for a moment. But yeah, I mean, it's him. Yeah, they'll send the dogs on you, because they don't really care very much about ordinary Britons. Anyway, let's now take a look at some of the comments of the Gagglers. The people have been waiting patiently. So, Danaki, always good to see you. Kedvesh George, that's Dear George. Do you agree with the contents of this tweet? GOP will never give up chasing the black vote. They'll never stop chasing that mirage. It's the worst ROI in electoral politics, and dumb. So this is a tweet sent out by Daryl. God Daryl, no, Daryl. His name escaped me. He's a kind of a regular um, of, of the War Room, he used to work for Trump, and you know he's actually a very smart guy. Um, anyway, he made the point. I mean, it was obviously this is apropos of Trump's appearance at the Association of Black Journalists yesterday. I don't know if anyone has watched it. It was quite spectacular. It lasted only 35 minutes. Um, it was brought to a halt, you know, for inexplicable reasons. But it was a quite you know, extraordinary. So you know, he goes there. He's invited to this, I think, National Association of Black Journalists, and then he was grilled by this woman, Rachel Scott. She works for ABC News. I don't watch ABC News, so I don't know anything about her. There was some woman from Semaphore, that's this new media outlet, and then there was Harris Faulkner from Fox News. And the Rachel Scott woman, she sort of launched into this tirade. You know, supposedly that was the first question. And I mean, it's all over YouTube, so you should just watch this. I mean, because it's absolutely it's vintage Trump. So she didn't really ask a question. She did the thing that Megyn Kelly famously did in that debate in 2015, where you go through a litany of accusations against Trump. You know, you said this, you said that, you know, and so on. So why should black people vote for you? Just like Megyn Kelly said, well, you know, you call women pigs, dogs, animals, disgusting creatures. So why should women vote for you? And then, of course, he famously said, only Rosie O'Donnell, and that kind of took the wind out of Megyn Kelly's sails. But in this case, as she did all this whole litany, he says, well, I've never really been spoken to in such a rude, nasty manner. You didn't even say, hello, how are you to me? You know, you just launched into this attack. And you know, I think that the thing is that, you know, Trump is a counterpuncher. He's a master counterpuncher. So when you're fighting a counterpuncher, you never try to knock him out, because that's what he's looking for. He's, you know, it's like he's wants you to go in and try to knock him out, because he's a counterpuncher. He's boom, he's going to hit you and hit you hard when you go in. That's why, you know, this was always the way Muhammad Ali did. He did very well against boxers who decided they were just going to knock him out. They were going to take one big swing at him and knock him out. Those were exactly the fighters that Ali liked to fight, because he would just hit them, you know, on the counterpunch. Ali didn't do so well against boxers who were kind of defensive and cunning and so on, because then Ali was confused. He didn't quite know how to fight them. But you know, say Sonny Liston or George Foreman, who tried to knock Ali out, they always did very poorly against him. But anyway, this woman, this Rachel Scott, didn't realize. I mean, she obviously hadn't watched that that debate with Megyn Kelly, and then the same thing with that woman on CNN, Caitlin Collins. Again, they tried to go for the knockout, and Trump that's just meat and drink for Trump. But what was also interesting was in that you know, then in the second question that this Rachel Scott asked him was, well, you know, you and the other Republicans have declared that Kamala Harris is a DEI hire. Do you think, you know, is that what you're saying? He's a DEI hire? And so then Trump had, he had a fun, well, can you define DEI? So what? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that, of course, wasn't a definition. I mean, that's just what the acronym stands for. So that she was kind of dumb in not being able to explain, well, what exactly is DEI? I mean, yeah, we know what the acronym stands for, but what does it actually mean? Then she said, all right, well, do you think that she was only hired because she is black? Which is a strange question because, of course, Biden famously promised that he would hire a black woman as his running mate. But now everyone's running away from that and pretending that this is a grievous insult to suggest that Kamala was essentially was hired because she's a black woman. I mean, everyone knew this at the time, and everyone thought this was great that she was hired as a VP because she was a black woman. But now they're all running away from that. But anyway, Trump then so she said, well, so do you think she was only hired because she's a black woman? And then she said, well, I think it's a different problem with Kamala because. To be honest, I didn't even know she was black. For years and years, I'd always assumed that she was Indian. She'd always presented herself as an Indian. And then she decided a few years ago that she was black. This was, the audience when just, there was some real commotion within the audience when he said this. And of course, naturally, all the predictable media outlets, New York Times and so on. My God, this is appalling. This is racist and so on. But of course, then people very easily have located all of the newspaper headlines saying, "Oh, Kamala Harris is, the first Indian American district attorney. Kamala Harris, the first Indian American U.S. senator." So she was indeed known as an Indian American, and then suddenly decided that she would be black. Now, again, Trump knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that the media would have a meltdown over this, and it's kind of amusing because of course, she's of course biracial. She's biracial, and she has always been proud of her Indian and her black heritage. That's the official line. She's always been proud of her Indian and her black heritage. And then, well, that's interesting. Did that apply to Barack Obama? Did Barack Obama ever say, "Well, I'm proud of my black and my white heritage"? Did he ever say that he was proud of being half white? I don't think so. Again, he just at some point he just declared that he was black, and then the whole issue of his white mother, his white grandmother, and all the white family that had brought him up, all that was quietly forgotten, and he was just black. He was just the black prince. So that was the thing, and of course now they're going to be. The media just going to go to town on this, thinking that this is a winning issue. Hey, Trump's a racist. Trump's a racist. He said that Kamala Harris isn't really black. It isn't going to work. I mean, it's playing right into his hands, and you kind of have to admire Trump's cleverness in doing this. It's like he knew that they were going to raise this question with him. And he prepared this, and then this naturally caused the predictable commotion within the media, and then of course that then fuels a debate that Harris's supporters don't really want to have, which is that well, what is she? I mean, is she black? Is she Indian? Which are you going to go with? And I remember the Democrats' strategy now. I mean, there's only, 100 days to the election? I think something. I don't know, whatever it is. It's just there's only now. This is August, September, October. That's 3 months plus plus a few days in November. So that's basically it's about 100 days to the election. The plan is to do the Biden thing, which is to keep her under wraps. Don't do too many interviews. Don't do too many rallies, other than with a very favorable audience, with plus a few celebrities, flying the movie stars and so on to cavort with. But no debates. I think she'll probably have this one debate with Trump. I don't think it'll be more than one debate. But basically, it'll be the Biden strategy of 2020. Just keep her under wraps and try to coast through to November on a sea of wildly enthusiastic media coverage. But anyway, just to go back to Danuki's question, because that's what this was the Darren Beattie tweet. I kind of agree with that. I mean, it's a strange issue that the Republicans always have this fantasy that they're going to really eat into the black vote. And it's true that some Republicans do a little bit better, some do a little bit worse, but ultimately we can say with great confidence today, on August the 1st, we can say with great confidence that Trump will not get more than 20% of the black vote. He's not going to get more than 20% of the black vote. Probably less, but that's his limit. Maybe among men it'll be a little bit higher. Maybe he'll get it up to 25% among men, but that'll be compensated by the fact that he'll get a very low vote among black women. So that's 20% of the vote, and it just doesn't change. It's just that in some cases, such as when the nominee is really lousy, such as like Mitt Romney or John McCain or Bob Dole, then it really tanks. Then suddenly the vote among blacks is in the single digits. So that's it. So that's 20%. Now then, there's a real question. I mean, if you're devoting all this energy on what is something is really a largely hopeless cause, then you're not using your limited resources wisely. And I think, as I've said before, in 2020, Trump started doing the pander to blacks in a way that was likely to really alienate his main constituency, which is white Americans. And let's keep in mind, a Republican cannot win the presidency without getting close to 60% of the white vote. He has to get 60% of the white vote to win. If you're down in the sort of 52, 53% of the white vote, you are going to lose as a Republican. You're going to lose. And that's really the key, that if he starts pandering, oh, I've got this program and I got this another, platinum program for blacks and so on, then it turns off his base. And then when he starts that stupid thing of releasing people from prison, and particularly in 2020 with the George Floyd riots, the summer of George Floyd, the cities were burning. There was a sudden spike in the murder rate, and then you got to go and boast, oh, I've started the First Step program, and I'm releasing all the people from prison that Joe Biden's Crime Act of 1994 had put in prison. Then you're not going to win that core constituency. You have to know your core constituency in the way the Democrats know. The Democrats, they know this is their base. The base is, the black vote and a chunk of the Hispanic vote. And it's the Republicans lose that and think that, they should devote their energy so that instead of 19% of the black vote. They're going to get 21% of the black vote, and in the meantime, they lose the support of their core constituents. They're going to lose an election, and and the same goes incidentally for the Hispanic vote. I mean, it doesn't change very much. The Republicans, Trump also will not get more than 40% of the Hispanic vote. But still, that's it. That's your peak, 40%. Now you can say, "Oh, this is great. This is wonderful." Yeah, okay, you've got 40%. That means the Democrats get 60%. See, the math, that's how the math goes. They get 60%, you get 40%. If you're going to devote your energies to this, instead of making sure that you get your base in line, then you're going to lose the election. At the moment, I think I think Trump is heading for defeat. I mean, I'm feeling I'm feeling a little pessimistic, but I do think he's heading for defeat because he's making all the mistakes that he's made in the past. It doesn't look like he's learned his lesson. I mean, he did an entertaining performance at this National Association of Black Journalists meeting, but I think he's making lots of mistakes. Attacking his own supporters as he did with this Project 2025, that is not good politics. You never want to attack your own supporters. There was no need for him. He could easily have said, the Project 2025, that's the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation has nothing to do with my campaign. I have good relations with them. I wish them well, but they don't speak for me. Instead of that, he went into this tirade attacking Project 2025. That's not good politics. So I don't know, and I think they're doing the PR for Harris very masterfully. They did that with Obama. They're doing an Obama thing with her. I think it may well turn out to be successful. Anyway, so that's my answer. Is that it on this question of I don't think it makes any sense for the Republicans, and you're losing your core constituency, and that's the only way you're going to win an election. You're going to mobilize your base and make sure your base shows up. All of it shows up because it's quite a tall order. You need to get 60% of the white American vote. If you don't get 60%, you're going to be in trouble. Anyway, Danaka says, also, is Iran competing with Putin at being led by the nose? The president dropped like a rock when they cut the chopper's GPS. Now the Israelis killed Haniya with a bomb planted in the villa 2 months ago. Yeah. I mean, all that. Incidentally, the thing with the helicopter was of course an absolute joke. I mean, they turned the transponder off. As you said, it fell like a rock. We don't even know whether was this an accident. But even the story was an accident was shocking in terms of the level of incompetence, because they were using helicopters from before the revolution. You're talking, this is, they had, pre-1979 helicopters. And then you again wonder, given that the weather was bad, why did the president use this, the helicopter? Why did, they turned the transponder off? We'd all been led to believe that somehow Russia and China somehow given them all sorts of new equipment and everything. It was pathetic. And then now the story, because the original story was, first of all, that there was speculation it was a drone attack. That, of course, did raise the question of how did the drone get through the Iranian air defense system. Then they came up with another story, which was that there was a message on the WhatsApp application on the phone, and that message managed to locate in Haniya. and that's how the Israelis were able to kill him. But now it looks like it was a bomb. A bomb was planted in this villa, and he was planted in this villa that he stayed in 2 months ago, and then activated when he got there. Now, I just find that is just quite extraordinary, because you would have thought any security service would know, you know, Israel is out to assassinate us. And particularly, they're out to assassinate any Hamas leader. That's what they've been doing. So you always want to do a sweep, make sure that there are no bugs anywhere, and you want to make sure that there are no explosive devices planted anywhere. This really is quite a joke. I mean, it's an embarrassment, an absolute embarrassment for Iran. And then we had and this is after a long series of embarrassments. We had the assassinations of its nuclear scientists, all of which were not responded to. And then we had that horrific terror attack. Remember, that was a few months ago. Never really got to the bottom of that. And then we had that pathetic response from Iran. Well, first of all, the pathetic response over the assassination of Soleimani, the national hero. It was just because the Americans Trump very generously said, well, we're going to allow you to save face. You can lob a few pointless missiles at our army barracks in Iraq. Nobody's going to be there. No one's going to get hit. But you can feel good about yourself that you lobbed a few useless missiles at us. And then, of course, there was something similar after they killed some generals in following the hit on the consulate in Damascus, and they said, okay, well, you can take it. You can hit Israel. You get everything's coordinated. They give you advance notice when they're going to do it. The Iron Dome system goes into operation, and no damage whatsoever is inflicted upon Israel. You conclude from this that Iran is just not ready for prime time. I mean, that's always been fairly obvious, and that Iran is still basically a third world power. It hasn't made too much progress in recent decades, despite hanging out with Russia and hanging out with China. It's just not in the big league. I mean, stronger than Saudi Arabia, that no question, but it's simply, it was simply a long way. We're a long way from challenging Western hegemony. Now, it's going to happen. I mean, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's just, it's not going to happen in the next couple of weeks. And that's basically it. But your main point is that this is a huge embarrassment for Iran. I mean, they planted a bomb 2 months ago. They didn't sweep the room. Make sure there are no electronic devices and there are no explosives there. I mean, it's a joke. Anyway, Cynthia, always good to see you, Cynthia. And then Cynthia goes on. I finally found a film review of The Passengers stating that David Locke, that's the name of the Jack Nicholson character at the center of the film, David Locke does indeed take his name from the philosophers David Hume and John Locke. Like Locke, Hume believed the mind is a blank slate at birth, but disagrees with the idea that we possess the innate capacity to reason. Hume believes there's no innate ideas or capacities within us, but that everything is acquired through experience, whereby we gain the capacity to reason and hold ideas. Yes, that is the Humean argument, as which, and then of course Immanuel Kant disputed that because he thought that, yeah, I mean, yes, we do acquire our knowledge um, of the external world through experience, and then the the creation of ideas, but it still presumes that there is an innate system of rationality within us that actually makes sense of all that and organizes it all into a kind of an understanding. And I think you'd have to say that that's the Kantian refutation of Hume is very sound. You know, it's hard to believe that you just learn everything through experience, that there isn't a functioning capability within the human mind that organizes it, and the perceptions and the reasoning into a coherent reasoning system. And so I think that was, but that is the Humean thing. That's Locke and Hume. But the question then is, how does that relate to the film? Same way. Okay, so Cynthia goes on. Hume also thought that all ideas come from two types of experience: outward and inward impressions. Okay, outward impressions come through our senses, yeah, while inward impressions come from internal reflection. So, if anything, David Locke embodies Hume's philosophy more than he does Locke's. So, outward impressions come from our senses, while inward, okay. You can definitely see this in the final hotel scene where the roving camera pans inside David's rooms and then slowly moves through the window to the outside world. It's a very interesting last scene because it's like we see through the window events that are going on outside, but there's a distance. We can't see it very well because it's like the perspective is from inside the room, so the events outside the room we don't see very clearly. It's just a sort of figures that are moving around at a considerable distance, and we don't really understand. We're not in any position to understand exactly what is going on, and that's why we don't even understand fully what happens to David Locke. We know he's dead at the end, but we don't know exactly what happened to him. So it's like we just see figures moving around, but we're unable to grasp what does it all mean. Where is this going? Who are these people, and what are they doing? Okay. And then Cynthia, thank you so much. Yeah, so Cynthia then provides a photo. Exactly, that's a photo of the outside, and you can see we see the barrier, the barrier. I mean, you could certainly say it's the subjective barrier that we have whenever we're trying to perceive the outside world, but we don't quite see what's going on because the distance is too great. Then again, when filmmaker Michelangelo Antonioni made that 7-minute penultimate shot at the Hotel de la Gloria, what he evidently had in his mind at the time was the quote from German philosopher Martin Heidegger: "Being is being in the world." Yeah, that was the Heideggerian. The Heideggerian notion is that we, as human existence, we talked about this the other day, the Dasein, being there, are always beings in the world. We don't have any any other existence than being in the world. And the world is this world of senses, world of other people. And so he took quite a radical empiricist position. I mean, really, he didn't take at all the idea of ideas. That there was something called ideas that had a an existence separate from the world. Like the sort of Platonic ideas that just exist outside of the realm of the world. He said, no, being is being in the world. So, we as whatever thinking creatures can never separate ourselves from the world. So he took a radically empiricist philosophy, which is kind of an interesting aspect of his existentialism. So this is really interesting. It's a really interesting insight into the Antonioni film. Anyway, then Cynthia goes on. Also, George, you described the film a thriller, which I thought was sort of odd since that never crossed my mind. So I look into the matter and surprisingly discover that it made the top 10 list of the best slow burn thrillers of all time. Many of the others on the list are French film, like the film Le Cercle Rouge and the prison break film Le Trou. But I did find it interesting that Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt made that list as well. That's an interesting. I thought it was a thriller because it's sort of the film is a kind of a chase film. I mean, he's trying to lose himself, but it's already that people are onto him, and now he's trying to escape. But there's also other people after him, and so it's really we don't actually know who's going to get him first. The police, his ex-wife, the or the the people to whom he is selling guns to. So it's kind of a chase, and we're kind of wondering. I mean, we know that this is going to end badly. He's heading towards disaster. He's kind of sealed his fate with the decisions that he's taken. So that's why I thought that it was a thriller. You kind of want to know, how is this going to end up? He's kind of, he's made his. I mean, it's very funny that I've always thought that there was a kind of a Hitchcockian element in Antonioni. I was talking the other day about L'Avventura, and that story, girl disappears. Her boyfriend and her best friend want to know what happened, and they start looking for her. And of course, they're not able to find her. And then they start an affair themselves, the boyfriend and the best friend, and then they kind of forget about the girl. The film kind of moves into something else. It's like we're now into another film, which is this couple, and we've forgotten all about the girl who's disappeared. So we don't know what the hell happened to that girl, and that's very Hitchcockian. I mean, if you think of Vertigo. I mean, we have Vertigo. Here's a man who murders his wife, and he sets up his friend Scotty, played by Jimmy Stewart, to witness essentially, supposedly an accident, but of course it's actually he murders his wife. But then we kind of forget all about that plot, and we're into some other plot, which is Scotty's issue with Vertigo. It's like, this guy just got away with murder, but we've forgotten all about that. We're into another film altogether. And then the same thing with Psycho. I mean, when we have in Psycho, we have this romance between Janet Leigh and her lover. And then, of course, she steals some money in order to help him out, drives to meet him, ends up in the motel, and of course, we know that she kind of ends badly. But what's striking is that that whole first half of the film, which is this romance between Janet Leigh and her lover, that's kind of forgotten, and we're now into another film altogether, which is Norman Bates and his mother. Mother isn't herself today. Uh, Now, so that's again the sort of Antonioni aspect to it, um, and Blow Up is a kind of like that as well. I mean, Blow Up, the whole theme of Blow Up is have we witnessed a murder or haven't we? We just keep wanting to know, did he photograph a murder or didn't he photograph a murder? And of course, that has echoes in Hitchcock's Rear Window, where we're not sure whether we've witnessed through the rear window a man murdering his wife. Anyway, it's very interesting when you said about the shadow of a doubt that I do think that there is a kind of Hitchcockian quality to Antonioni. So, Marty, always good to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity, as always. W. Baker, thank you for your generosity. So maybe they were chasing Baerbock's shenanigans. Baerbock, I'm not sure what this. I mean, probably was apropos of something said earlier, but I'm not quite sure what we're what shenanigans of Baerbock we're talking about. So if you could let me know. I mean, that I could address that. And then Denaki, market pricing a Kamala victory. Yeah, I think so. 60 cents. Thank you so much, 60 cents. Friendly reminder, please consider Dr. Morteza Mohit. I'm going to write this for this friendly reminder. Morteza Mohit. Okay. Thank you. And then W. Baker, don't forget the Assange wrap up. Yeah, I think I said that Assange. Did I say the Assange? Yeah. Well, if I didn't, I meant the Assange wrap up. The Assange wrap up was very much a part of that, and remember, in the Assange wrap up was the demand that Assange destroy some documents. We never know what are these documents that Assange had to destroy, but he destroyed documents. And it's kind of interesting because what we really want to know with Assange is, hey, who provided you with those DNC emails? We had this whole Russiagate fraud based on those DNC emails, which allegedly was stolen by the GRU and then passed on to WikiLeaks. This hoax, which almost led to war between the United States and Russia, and the answer. You know exactly who gave you those emails. But I am sure that the deal that was struck with Assange was you keep your mouth shut about that. You never talk about any of that. So I would think that probably we're not going to hear very much more from Julian Assange. I mean, he might still run WikiLeaks or on any kind of supervisory basis, but I just don't think. I think again that was probably part of the deal with the Australian government, the U.S. government, which is that you kind of make yourself scarce. I don't know, but I don't know. I just feel that that was that was the deal. You want your freedom, then just forget all this about all the things you used to do. Anyway. So Cynthia says Maduro has won the Venezuela presidential election, and the U.S. supported opposition is going to give a masterclass in how to contest electoral results. Perhaps that'll also serve as a dress rehearsal for our own presidential election in November. No, I think so. And I think that the pattern in November will be very similar to the pattern in 2020, which is the key is going to be the mail-in vote. So we're probably going to be on Tuesday night. We'll have a Trump lead, and then once you know what the Trump lead is, and quite mysteriously, they start counting the vote, count, and lo and behold, it starts surpassing the Trump vote. And that's exactly the way they did in 2020. You had Trump leading in all these states, and then they just kept counting and counting and counting until they found the requisite votes. I mean, it's an old trick. I mean, there's no genius behind it. I mean, that's what Mayor Daley did that in Illinois in 1960. I mean, that was the key was once he knew what Nixon's lead was in Illinois, he knew how many votes he had to find, once the graveyard vote started coming in, and then he found the vote. So there's no trick there. Once you have this mail-in voting, and then then you know what the lead is, then you got to find the vote. So yeah, I think that's how they're going to do it. And I don't think, from what one can gather, that any of the problems that arose in 2020 have been resolved. I really don't think so. And I don't think Republicans are prepared for it. They sort of smugly assume Trump was going to win in a landslide. I have no idea why they assumed that, but there's been an assumption. I guess they thought, oh, we'll have Biden, and no one's going to vote for Biden, so Trump will win in a landslide. So I don't think they've done the work that's necessary in order to ensure that there's going to be a clean and fair election. And they haven't even cleaned the electoral rolls. I mean, how can you have elections when you have electoral rolls that are ridiculously out of date? Ridiculously out of date. And so you have this mail-in voting, they send out masses of ballots, to people who don't exist, people who haven't lived at these addresses in years. It's ridiculous. Anyway, Robert, thank you very much, Robert. Really appreciate that. And it says, you've painted quite a dystopian picture, calling to mind 1970s Britain, which gave rise to the punks and their great anthem, Anarchy in the UK. It's hard to see how such a movement could emerge today, given that arts and music have so absorbed woke. I mean, I tend to agree with you. I am kind of pessimistic. I don't see that this can work. I think the campaign against the sort of the right-wing thugs and so on, which you already see every politician screaming, the right-wing thugs. We need to crack down. And incidentally, we need to crack down on the social media that allow the right-wing thugs to send out their disinformation messages. And given they've got the police is absolutely ready to use any force necessary against the right-wing thugs. And any politician such as Nigel Farage, who is a very, very moderate sort of person, very sober sort of person. So even when he he does his broadcasts and he said, well, we need to understand people's anger and people's frustration, and maybe the authorities are not really coming clean with us about what's really going on with these violent crimes, he immediately gets attacked that he Farage is instigating the riots. Very similar to what they did to Trump, that somehow you were responsible for January the 6th. So I don't think I don't think they can win this. I really don't. I mean, I just don't think. I think given the political and media class in the UK, I mean, when it's Rishi Sunak and then Keir Starmer, that it's hard to see how you can break out of that. Now, the 1970s is an interesting case because in the 1970s, for some time, it was far from clear who was going to win out in Britain. So if you look at, say, 1977, 78, 79, 80, right through to the early 80s, you had a very powerful left and a kind of left-wing populism, around the sort of the trade union movement. You had a leader like Tony Benn with a huge following. But now Thatcher won that election, but it was by no means clear that Thatcher would survive. I mean, it was Thatcher's government was not at all popular. So it was really, if you were thinking of 1981, and that was, I think, the year of the royal wedding. Everyone always remembers 1981, the royal wedding. But what was striking about 1981 was the contrast between that spectacular royal wedding of Charles and Diana, which the media loved, with a lot of anger in the streets over Thatcher's policies. And so it was not at all clear that Thatcher would prevail or Thatcher would win the next election. And it was the Falklands War, that stupid decision by the Argentine generals to invade the Falklands. It was Thatcher's victory in the Falklands that secured her election in 1983. And then I think it was different. So nobody exactly knew then in the 1970s which way he was going to go. And Enoch Powell was still a figure on the scene. Now, he had gone to Northern Ireland, and that, of course, did cause problems. I mean, it was not clear how you could be the leader of the Conservative Party if you were also a member of the Democratic Unionist Party, which is what he was a member of. But a Powell premiership was not out of the question. So at the time, in the late 70s, early 80s, you kind of had a left-wing populism surrounding the trade unions, and then you had a right-wing populism which surrounded the National Front. Now, the National Front has now disappeared. There really isn't a kind of a National Front party any longer. But at the time, the National Front was gaining votes, and it was not impossible that it could become a serious political force. But now I think they can just crush anyone. They can just send the dogs against you, or you got this guy Tommy Robinson. He's just in and out of the courts. He doesn't even live in the UK. He lives in Tenerife. So I think it's an eternal kind of political establishment forever. Keir Starmer forever. So I feel quite pessimistic. Just like I think we're gonna in the United States we're gonna have forever Kamala. Anyway, Robert says, in my opinion, the greatest defensive boxer of all time was Argentinian Nicolino Loche. It's a marvel to watch old footage of his maneuver at close range, dodging blow after blow, leaving his often much stronger opponents dumbfounded. No, that's interesting. I'm not really familiar with him. I mean, there've been a number of them. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Jimmy Young, who's quite a successful boxer in the 1970s, and he gave Ali so many problems. I think they fought in '76. The judges gave Ali the fight because Ali was the champion, and you basically give deference to the champion. I mean, unless you've decisively defeated the champion, the judges give it to the champion. But if you watch that fight, Jimmy Young clearly got the better of Ali. Ali just couldn't figure out how to fight him. And then Jimmy Young fought George Foreman. Foreman was a very difficult fighter. He was a big, strong guy, and Jimmy Young defeated Foreman. So I, kind of remember. I mean, Ali had obviously defeated Foreman, but then Jimmy Young also defeated Foreman, and that kind of triggered Foreman to leave boxing, and he left it for a while until he came back much later. But it's kind of an example of somebody who had great boxing skills. Wasn't necessarily the biggest guy or the strongest guy, but he could confuse his opponents. Opponents they just don't quite know how to fight him. But it's kind of Jimmy Young is sort of forgotten now. I mean, when people remember the boxers of the 1970s, Jimmy Young is forgotten. People remember Norton, Ali, Frazier, Foreman, but they've forgotten Jimmy Young. Anyway, Robert says, my impression of the Trump NAJP, the National Association of Black Journalists, interaction is that while two of the reporters had gone in the event, minds made up to hate Trump, towards the end, Trump managed to charm them so they warmed to him against their studied determination not to. Well, I don't know whether, I think Harris Faulkner obviously liked Trump. I mean, they have a long relationship. I mean, he's done so many interviews for Fox News. The one at Semaphore, I'm not at all familiar with. I didn't notice that the Rachel Scott had warmed to him. And to be honest, I didn't think that the audience was that hostile to Trump. I mean, it obviously was quite hostile, but it wasn't as hostile as you might have expected. I mean, there were a little boos and guffaws and everything at the things he said, but nothing like any systematic booing. I think when was it? I think when in 1992, when Ross Perot, I think went before, I think the National Association, the NAACP, and then he several times referred to them as "you people," and every time he said "you people," there were massive boos in the audience, and Perot clearly showed his ineptitude, his lack of any political sophistication to use a term like "you people." Though I don't think that's necessarily any worse than the ubiquitous "you guys." Everyone is "you guys, you guys, you guys." But anyway, it's another issue. But Trump didn't have anything like the reception that Ross Perot had in '92. But that was so vehement at the NAACP that Perot dropped out of the race, at least for a time, and then of course he came back because the media had sneered at him so much with his the quitter, and then he came back, but of course he was already a spent force by the time he came back. Anyway, Carlos says, what would be the major sign that an all-out conflict will start in the Middle East? Well, I think if Iran or Hezbollah launched a really devastating, well, mainly Hezbollah. If Hezbollah launched a really devastating attack on Israel that would inflict huge casualties, and then Israel launched an invasion of Lebanon to destroy Hezbollah, Iran would probably be under pressure to get involved. Iran can't allow Hezbollah to be defeated by Israel. So if Iran then were to intervene against Israel, launch, again, serious attacks upon Israel, the United States would have to then seriously weigh what it would do, because they can't really sit. Americans can't really sit on their hands and allow Iran to launch a massive attacks on Israel. So that, I think that's something along those lines would be the signs of an all-out war. But I think even when you describe it in that way, it's not likely to happen, because if you see that Iran really doesn't want to get into a war with Israel, and Hezbollah doesn't want to get into a war with Israel. I mean, for all the talk about how well Hezbollah did in 2006, and it did do well, but Hezbollah also took a huge hit, enormous casualties, and Hezbollah doesn't want to do that. So I think it's unlikely, to be honest, that it'll happen. I mean, it could, but I think Israel's calculation that it's not going to happen. I think that's why they did it. They assassinated the Hamas leader in the reasonable expectation that Iran's response will be very limited, if any. It's quite possible Iran isn't going to do anything. After all, it wasn't an Iranian who was killed. It was a humiliation for the security services. So they might, Iran might just simply say, hey, we kind of deserve that for being so manifestly incompetent. I'm not saying that's what they'll do, but they may just decide, we need to take a hit on this because it was just such a massive lack of security precautions. Then Danrock says, don't forget the embarrassment and tragedy of shooting the Ukrainian Airlines jet upon panicking on the U.S. retaliation. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's thank you for reminding us that that's what happened. That after Iran launched this attack on the U.S. barracks in Iraq, the Iranians, in panic, they shot down a Ukrainian airliner. They thought the Ukrainian airliner was an American plane coming to bomb Iran. Now, why Iran didn't close down its airspace? Having launched this attack on the American base in Iraq, then the minimum that he should have done is just simply close down the airspace. Instead, they kind of allowed, passenger jets to take on and off. And, of course, that's what you got. By not closing down the airspace, they confused this Ukrainian passenger airliner with an American aircraft, and they shot it down. It was, embarrassment. I can't remember how many were killed, but it was pretty horrific, and they had to issue a humiliating apology. So, unfortunately, again, we're listening too much to this hype about the the coming changing of the guard in the world. The new powers are coming to the fore. BRICS. So on, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We're a long way from this serious challenge to the West. And then Marty says, music-themed film night. Amadeus Mahler. Let me read this. Amadeus Mahler. So you mean when the Mahler... I'm just thinking about, are you thinking of Death in Venice? Because the music in Death in Venice was Mahler, or is there some other film that you're thinking of with Mahler? Because I mean, Death in Venice, I think is that is a music theme, but it's a good idea. I think a music themed Monday film night. I think it's an excellent idea. Yeah. Thank you. Um, and then W. Baker says the Russian spies and what they were doing said in jest. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's the um, uh, Annalena Baerbock. And then Anne Marie, oh, thank you so much, Anne Marie. Always appreciate your generosity. I was asking the following question on Tuesday. What do you think about the films of Claude Chabrol? Claude Chabrol was a very interesting French filmmaker. Made some very good. Oh, yeah, Marty says Ken Russell. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, Ken Russell, yeah, that you did Mahler, but it's funny. When I was thinking when you said Mahler, I was thinking of Death in Venice because it featured Mahler's music. So, but Ken Russell did make that film about Mahler. No, we could do both. Both two films featuring Mahler's music, Ken Russell and Death in Venice. Anyway, going back to Claude Chabrol, I think he was a very interesting filmmaker, and he made some very good thrillers, but they're very distinctive French thrillers. So he was always described as France's answer to Alfred Hitchcock, but I think Hitchcock was, I think, a very different kind of filmmaker. Um, but uh, but Chabrol made some very good, very distinctively French films, usually set in some French small town. It's usually a murder, and usually he's trying to show the nastiness and the hypocrisy of the French bourgeoisie. Um, again, I mean, the strength of the films they're not really that thrilling, but the sense you get of small town French life, the nastiness of the French bourgeoisie, um, and a lot of uh, and a lot of the hypocrisy. He made one of his last films um, was I think Ceremony with Isabelle Huppert. I've forgotten the name of the other actress. Another one of these major um, French film actresses of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and so on. It was a classic also of Ceremony. Again, you have the bourgeoisie living a very nice life. Um, they're listening to Mozart. Beautiful. They have a beautiful home, beautiful family, um, and eat well and drink well. They have this wonderful. It's like a perfect life. And again, Chabrol and other French filmmakers they're very good at portraying this almost this perfect idyllic life in France. You think, God, I want to live like that, and then of course, it's all destroyed by brutal murder. But that's where you go down in Ceremony, where here we have this bourgeoisie who living this great life, and then there are these two women, very poor, poor women. One I think is, is just a cleaning woman, and the other one is just a post office postmistress, and they team up just to destroy, to kill this family. It's a nasty, brutal film, but well worth watching. I mean, it shocks you when you see it. Again, it's a slow film. All Chabrol's films are slow, but the violence when it comes, I mean, it's quite. Was it? Anne Marie says, was it Sandrine Bonnaire? It may have been. It may have been her. Yeah, I think I was. Yeah. So Isabelle Huppert, I mean, she's been around, I think since the 1960s. She was the postmistress. It may have been Sandrine Bonnaire, her kind of young friend who was barely literate. It was just kind of a cleaning woman, and really a bit of a half-wit. But people who are half-witted, if you slight them, they can respond with real rage and violence. And so, but again, well worth seeing. as I think all I think Chabrol's films um, are well worth seeing. Um, One of his earliest films, no, actually, it wasn't one of his earliest. I mean, he made an awful lot of films. Well, the one Les Biches, he was married to a very beautiful woman, Stéphane Audran. Um, that's well worth it. It's again very again it's a psychological thriller. There was not so much violence in it, but it's again good kind of psychological dynamic between the three protagonists. So yeah, I'm very 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 positive about him. But people who kind of expect Hitchcock are disappointed. But that's because that's just the way the media portrayed him as, oh, he's France's answer to Hitchcock. But he has a distinctive style of its own, and not it's not Hitchcock. Anyway, so so thank you. And so, W. Baker, have you read the accusation about Annalina's lavish spending on gigolos at state expense and her Afghan Shenzhen visa controversy? I haven't. I only read about the accusations about Annalina's lavish spending on her hair. That she had this huge, shockingly huge um, expense at her hairdressers, and then she made that sheepish crack about, well, if I didn't do that, I'd be as gray as a gravedigger, and nobody really liked that. But even then, it was hard to justify. Well, why are you spending that much on your hair? I mean, okay, you want to get rid of the gray, understandable, but really, you have to spend that much on your hairdresser. But the stuff about the gigolos, that's interesting. That is, I hadn't read that, and I'd like to read about that. The gigolos, Annalina and the gigolos, and her Afghan Shenzhen visa controversy. Um, I think Afghan Schengen, I think, rather than Shenzhen. I mean, unless it's some Afghan Shenzhen hound, but the Schengen visa controversy. No, I'm going to look at that, and we're going to feature that on the Gaggle, because we always like to have a good laugh about Annalina Baerbock and her 360 degrees. So the stuff about the gigolos, I'm kind of really, really intrigued by. So then Marty talks about Ken Russell mocked Death in Venice in Mahler. Yeah, he did. Death in Venice. I mean, I liked the book, and I liked the film. I mean, the film is really kind of a masterpiece, because really nothing happens in the book. I mean, it's just a short story. Almost nothing at all happens in it. So to be able to do that, to turn that into a movie, was quite something, because it's all really kind of philosophic meditations on the part of this writer, Aschenbach, Gustav von Aschenbach. But in the film, they turned him into a composer, and that's why they played this Mahler. But it's a stunningly beautiful film, because it's all filmed in Venice, and but so it's visually spectacular, and of course musically it's also spectacular, because you hear Mahler all the time. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Ken Russell, I'll be honest. I didn't like any of his films about music. I didn't like his film on Tchaikovsky. Not a fan of his on Mahler. I don't know. I just felt that you know these are titans. I mean, Mahler and Tchaikovsky. They're these are great composers. They're major figures in the world of music. You feel like, who the hell is Russell to be playing games with them? I mean, Russell is obviously a talented filmmaker, but basically, I mean, you're nobody to be to be making fun of them, or kind of mocking them, and and attributing all kinds of sexual perversions on them. It's just inappropriate. So I was never, I didn't really like any of his musical films. Like Marty says, I love Death in Venice and Ken Russell. Okay, well, you like Ken Russell, and but we could certainly, have that. I think as a musical night is a good idea, and I think we can certainly do that. Um, Amadeus is obviously. I mean, if anyone else could think of other films that that feature music, preferably in the English language, because we have problems with if it's a foreign language film and subtitles, it's we can't show it. So so if it's English language film, that I'd say I think Amadeus. I haven't seen Amadeus in a long time, and that's something also worth discussing as to whether that was appropriate, that the original play and the film were really an appropriate way to deal with Mozart's genius. Anyway, let's go back. And then Lenz Locke says, interesting point that the inevitable sexual depravity of female elites and young men has yet to become a thing. I agree. I think so. Yeah, no, I think so. And you say female elites and young men. It's also young women. I mean, the stories are rife about the female executives in Hollywood and how they exploit the young women who work for them. And so, yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. Okay, so now that's Baker. That's a W. Baker. Gives us a link. Let's see what's on the link. Maybe something about Baerbock. View in channel. So let's see. Well, let's view it in the channel. Open Telegram. Can I see it? Let's see. Is that Open Telegram? Taking forever to open. God, I wish I. But this is let's see. Updating. This is wonderful. So Telegram is updating. I wanted to open. I didn't ask it to update. But the headline is, German MFA, that's the foreign minister, accused of being involved in Schengen visa scandal. But I still can't see the story as yet. Here we are. All right, here we go. Baerbock's nightmare week continues following her African sex tourism scandal. I got to find out what this African sex tourism scandal is. All right, this is. All right, let's go back to this. I can't see this now. I'll take a look. Telegram's a little hard. Um, follow. Yeah, he's got it. You copied and pasted. So, Baerbock Sniper, following her African sex tourism, she's now implicated in a Schengen visa scandal. How much longer will Germany tolerate this? Well, this could be very interesting. Um, we're definitely going to follow this up because we like Annalena Baerbock here at the Gaggle. I mean, she's always good for a laugh. So yes. Now Carlos says, "I don't suppose you want to watch The Commitments." Well, the problem with The Commitments, which was about this rock band in that they set up in Northern Ireland. I guess it was sometime in the 1990s. Is that I mean, yeah, the music is obviously it's rock and roll music of the 1950s. The what makes me hesitate is the language. There's an awful lot of the F word in that. I mean, it's pretty much every other word is the using of the F word. And while I'm not really, I don't think anyone here is a prude. There is a point at which this may not be quite the gaggle where we try to elevate our audience, where we try to raise our sights to higher things. We talk about Mahler, we talk about Heidegger, like Cynthia, dresses, David Hume, John Locke, Thomas Mann and Death in Venice. We try to think about, bigger things. We discuss Wagner, Brahms, and while, we can talk about rock and roll, but the a kind of relentless spate of FUs for 2.5 hours, I just may not be entirely up the Gaggle street. But we can maybe think about that, see what other people think. And then W. Baker says, "Sorry to be so low church in my subject matter." No. That's not subject matter is good. That's it's good to raise her because it's always fun. With Annalena Baerbock. She's just such a ridiculous person, so ludicrous in every way. With all her, we must go to war with. We're at war with Russia and so on. Anyway, my time is up. I've been doing this now for a while, and but there's a lot of interesting things. Talk about the Morteza Mohit. We're going to look into that, and the music themed Monday night. I think that's an excellent suggestion. So thank you so much, Marty. Anyway, thank you for today. Really appreciate that. Thank you for all your questions, comments, ideas. Thank you above all to those who contributed to the tip jar, because that those hounds, they just had it with me. I mean, they said, "Look, just enjoy the summer. Just go out, walk around a little bit. Ride your bicycle if you need to. Just don't do any more live streaming. Just leave that to the grown-ups. Just forget the live streaming. Just don't do it." So I have to put up with that. So I think I did my best. I got some tips. I don't get much of a sympathetic audience, but I do what I can. Anyway, thank you so much. We're going to be back, with a few podcasts over the weekend, live streaming next week, next Monday, and then next Tuesday. So thank you for tonight. Good night. Have a great weekend. See you very soon. All the best. Bye-bye.